Welcome to Wellness Rebranded.
We know there is so much conflicting health and fitness advice out there.
And you're tired of the wellness fads, endless diets, and impossible standards that make you feel like nothing you do is ever enough.
You're ready to tune into your mind and body and feel empowered around health.
We're the Healing Trio here to help you redesign your relationships with food, fitness, and yourself.
I'm Elizabeth, registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor.
I'm Maria, licensed mental health therapist.
And I'm Tara, personal trainer.
Together, we're changing the narrative on health away from diet culture, hustle culture, and toxic positivity and towards healthful self-care.
So grab your water bottle, get ready to laugh, learn, and grow.
And let's start rebranding your wellness journey.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Wellness Rebranded. We have some very special guests here today. We are interviewing Amanda Ashcraft and Ann Kent, who co-authored The Brain Plate, which is a cookbook, meal plan, and supplement guide for mental health. Amanda is a licensed therapist, registered dietitian, and integrative mental health specialist who has spent more than 15 years helping individuals understand how food, mood, and behavior intersect. Her work spans inpatient eating disorder treatment, ADHD and anxiety care, medical nutrition therapy, and mental health therapies, and she owns her private practice, NutriMind. Ann Kent is a registered dietitian, certified diabetes care and education specialist, and certified intuitive eating counselor. She created her meal plan app called Peas and Hoppy, Meal Plan Guides, love that name, to help busy families make practical changes to improve their health. Through her app, she streamlines the meal planning process and provides attainable, bite-sized pieces of education in every recipe. So welcome to you both. We're so excited to have you here.
We're excited to be here.
We met at a conference back in the fall, and I was immediately drawn to you guys for several reasons. First of all, your book has the most beautiful cover, actually. But also, we're all about healthcare practitioners collaborating here on Wellness Rebranded. So I think your collaboration jumped out at me. And I just wanted to start by asking, can you just share a little bit about how you guys came together and ended up partnering on this book? Because I think it's really cool.
Well, we met through local networking. I met someone else who told me about Ann. She's like, she's a wonderful dietitian. You should go talk with her. And I was like, I have not met very many dietitians where we were at the time. And so we connected and we started with just thinking we could collaborate on a meal plan for Ann's app. And then as I was discussing with her more nutrients of importance, we were kind of discussing how we'd want to explain this to her people on her app of these nutrients are really helpful for you and why, and how to incorporate it to your meal plan. All of this to say is that it continued to grow, and we wanted to put into a book form so people could have a 4-week meal plan with supplement information that wasn't, I would say, misleading, that's out there a lot on the internet right now, and make it to be a very user-friendly reference for clinicians and, I guess, the public. So it just started as a connection and then wanting it to be the best fit for clinicians and the general population.
Yeah, I love that.
Love that.
Who did you have in mind when you wrote the book?
Who?
Kind of both.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think as a dietitian, I don't use supplements a lot, or I haven't previously in my practice. And so this introduction to using supplements and nutrients as medicine was sort of a different concept to me. And I've met a lot of other dietitians and therapists actually who feel like there's a little bit of a gap there, that food is really important in some of these different like mental health conditions, but clinicians aren't necessarily educated in that. And so we wanted to provide enough robust education that a clinician could use it. But we wrote the book really intentionally that it could be read by someone who hasn't had as much biochemistry, maybe as a dietitian has. So in a strange way, the answer is we really actually wrote it to both a clinician who hasn't had a lot of experience with supplements, but also for a lay person who hasn't had a lot of science background.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. I mean, I didn't know that before I asked you the question, but having read the book and hearing that answer, I will genuinely say I think you nailed it.
Oh, well, thank you.
So I'm fascinated with the connection between food and mental health. That's not something that as a personal trainer, I don't think of that very often, but I have a colleague who is literally, she started her own gym and it's like fitness for mental health only is what she does. So I love that you guys are kind of doing like food and mental health. Can you talk about like when you first noticed that connection between the two and then how that's kind of guided your business?
I will say mine started a really long time ago when I worked at the inpatient eating disorder rehab center. You see clients or patients, their brain is just not turned on. Like regular therapy, deeper conversations are not there when they're underfed. And then you see their brains turn back on as they're being fed. And we gave them vitamins that they needed a lot based on physical needs, but they were a little bit earlier in the mental health needs because this was 16 years ago. They looked at folate and how it helps their antidepressants, and they were doing vitamin D and, omega-3s, all of those things, along with medication and therapy, obviously, to support their mental health. And so that's where it started. And I saw the differences that were being made in those patients' brains. And just with my combination of counseling and nutrition, I knew nutrition is not just about food, and counseling and, mental health is not just counseling and meds. Like it's behavioral changes, nutrient changes that will make people feel better. So it started a long time ago. And then as I've continued to work in counseling, I've seen how people's moods improve whenever they just start to treat themselves better and try to nourish themselves better. It all compounds together with counseling, medication management, and nutrition.
When Amanda came to me and was telling me about this, I was like, well, of course, this makes sense. Literally the first line in our book is you are what you eat. And we mean that in the sense of we are literally composed of food. And so if you don't eat nutrients, you can't make the neurotransmitters you need. You can't synthesize, your brain doesn't have as healthy of cell membranes and all of these components. And so that's why in our book, we focus really on an addition perspective to food, is we think about what maybe are you missing and what could we add to help support you. And just like Amanda said, once you start to rebuild, it's kind of amazing that food isn't the magic wand that's going to take care of maybe someone's genetically predisposed mental health condition. But without it, it's really hard to treat the whole person. And we sort of see it as one of these foundations that you need as a starting point in order for these other therapies to work most effectively.
Yeah, it's certainly a pillar. And I love how you framed that, Amanda, that, mental health isn't just counseling and nutrition isn't just food.
That stuck out to me too.
Yeah, of course, but I don't know that a lot of people think about it that way. I'm just curious, were you a dietitian first or a mental health therapist first?
Dietitian first.
Okay. And then what prompted you to then go and become a therapist?
Okay, so I went to a coordinated program. So my undergrad was all in a bachelor's and internship program. A lot of my cohorts were continuing to get their master's. Well, I loved outpatient counseling and outpatient nutrition. And so I was like, well, I think I'm going to go get my master's in counseling because that'll make me a better outpatient dietitian. And so it was kind of I want to do something different because that interests me a little bit more and it will help grow my outpatient abilities. And then I fell in love with the counseling part as well. So it was kind of I want to try something different that will support my nutrition practice. And then I fell in love with the counseling.
Yeah, I love that. I'm wondering if we can just take a step back because, Anne, you sort of started to touch on it, but I feel like it would be a good foundation for the conversation. Can you just either one or both of you share, what do you think that the people listening need to understand about their brain and how it works in order to put this conversation in context?
I would say it's not a separate entity to your body. It's all about your whole body nutrition. It is affected by nutrition just as much as your heart, your kidneys, your digestive tract. It's all connected and needs nutritional support. Even, just the gut is literally connected to the brain through the HPA axis. And the gut is also where 90 to 95% of the serotonin is produced, which impacts mood and happiness, really. So I would just say it's why we did this was because nutrition impacts the brain and the body, and they are connected.
Is there anything you want to add, Anne?
No, I agree. That whole body wellness piece, I think, is really essential. And that when we were writing the book, that's what really stood out to me was that it's really important to control your cholesterol levels so that you can preserve your cognitive function into old age. Cholesterol and your overall cardiovascular health is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's and some forms of dementia. And so it made me take pause and think, wow, I probably need to add more fish. Like my husband probably needs to go get his cholesterol checked again. We need to like be, taking care of this. And it makes sense when you think about the brain. It's one of the most energy demanding organs of the body. And so if you're not able to effectively bring the glucose to your brain or the oxygen because your cardiovascular health isn't good, then that's of course going to suffer. And so it really is like a lot more connected maybe than we think. I think we tend in medicine, I think we're trying to get away with this when we have these holistic conversations with different providers here. But historically, it's been like we separate these into different components. There's the mental health, the trainers, and each person is doing their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when we work together, it's the synergy of this that really makes a big difference. So this 4-week meal plan, it's good for a lot of things that's in the book. It's not just good for your brain, but you're also going to see benefits for your heart health and for your inflammation and for your blood sugar and like all of these different things because they all impact each other.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm like, dang, I need to look at this meal plan.
Feels like a good time to talk about carbs since we're talking about sort of the brain and how it works and what we need. I think we all a lot of our listeners are moving away from diet culture and into intuitive eating. And obviously we're all very much aligned, but I would love for you guys to share from a brain perspective what you would love people to know about carbs.
We love carbs. The brain loves carbs.
Same.
Yeah. I think it's really important for people to know that carbs are your brain's preferred energy source. And so when you don't eat enough carbs, you start to feel symptoms of not eating enough carbs because your brain is like, hello, don't forget about me. Like, I need this. And I think it's really confusing to the public because you are technically able to survive without eating enough carbs because our bodies are designed to keep us alive. And so if you are under eating carbohydrates, you will not perish immediately, but you don't feel your best. And that's because your brain has to switch to like a secondary fuel like ketones or something in order to function. So that is, and Amanda can speak to this more maybe, but like that's why in the book we start with fueling, we start with enough. That's the idea. Because at the end of the day, if you're not eating enough, there's no amount of supplementation or adding protein drinks that can make up for a lack of something that your brain is preferring.
Mm-hmm. And there's just so many nutrients and carbohydrates that you don't get in other places, like the prebiotic fiber that fuels your gut microbiome, all the B vitamins. A lot of those are in carbohydrates. A lot of zinc is in things like that as well. So it's just, you can get a lot of nutrients from other places, but carbohydrates are a main source of so many micronutrients that are helpful to your mental health.
Maybe I'll add too, I'm also a diabetes educator, as you mentioned in my bio. And so my background is balancing blood sugars. That's what we chat about all day long. And so I definitely understand the importance of balancing blood sugars. And I know where people's fears come from around carbohydrates. And in the book, in each of the meal plans, I'm really strategic when I write them to make sure that I'm balancing carbohydrates with protein and fiber and healthy fat to help give you like this long lasting energy effect. We're not against white rice or some of these simple carbohydrates, but there is a way to strategically add those in with other foods and pair them so you get the best of both worlds. You get to enjoy some of these delicious foods you love, and you actually get a healthy blood sugar rise after your meal. We're trying to do in the book, and I try to do with the meal plans that I write, is to show people how you can add these in a way that meets all of your needs, meets your taste hunger, but also your physical needs.
I love that. It feels like Instagram is so full of pseudoscience, like gut, brain, health, food, that it almost feels like it's another version of diet culture or like part of diet culture. But the way that you just described how you can just modify whatever you're eating to kind of like meet your body's physiological needs, it makes so much sense. I'm so glad you shared that.
Yeah, it is really confusing because I think that, and this social media is really designed to polarize us, I think. And so it's easy to get into that black or white feeling and think that there's no middle ground, but there's a very large middle ground that we can work with. And it's amazing how many foods you can add in when you're strategic about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I very much all about an add-in approach as well. And I love that you spoke about it also, not just from the brain perspective, but from blood sugar and diabetes perspective, because I do think that's especially confusing for people. Even, there are a lot of people that are trying to move out of the restrictive mindset and diet culture, but then maybe they get a diagnosis of prediabetes or diabetes, and then they still will often think like, oh, now I have to stop eating carbs. And I know all three of us as dietitians are like, no, 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 that's not really what you have to do. But still people think it and they hear it other places and sometimes even from doctors. So important to talk about that.
Thinking about launching a podcast or taking yours to the next level? Juliana Barbati and her team are the experts you need. They take care of everything from episode funnel design to production and marketing, so you can focus on creating content that connects. Check out julianabarbati.com and mention that we sent you.
You mentioned a bit ago, forgive me, I forget which one, I think it might have been you, Anne, but your book covers a lot about supplements. And I think that's another area that's just really confusing for people in general. So can you start by just talking, especially a lot of our listeners are women in midlife, like perimenopause, just past menopause. And, we're marketed so many different supplements for this, that, and the other thing. And it can start to just be really confusing or like a full-time job. But how do you guys start the conversation before anyone takes anything? Well, what do you wish people knew about supplements? Let's start there.
Well, a supplement won't fix a diet for sure. And I would want to make sure we were adding in foods that we could before we decided to take a supplement about every single thing. And then I would want to say maybe we should get some labs for things that are appropriate for labs, like vitamin D or iron or B12, kinds of like testing to see if you need that. And then I would look after we've, talked about food, see, okay, are you incorporating these things enough, or are they things that you need a supplement for? Like people who don't like fish, I would recommend omega-3 fatty acids, or maybe a vegan or a vegetarian. I'd be like, probably need some iron, all of those types of things. And then there are some that are hard to get from food alone, like creatine has been shown to help with memory and cognitive function and improve from sleep deprivation and things like that. That is hard to get from food alone. So that would be dependent on the individual, but that would be something that if that would benefit them, it would be through a supplement. And then my last thing is always to make sure they're third party tested, because a lot of things people are claiming are going to do all these things and help them have no lab data to support them. And we don't really know what's in them, especially all those drink mixes that we're seeing around. I'm like, I don't really know who is making sure that's really what's in there or not. But that would be my overview of supplements. But there's more specific things for, individual needs, but that's where we would probably start.
The way we set up the supplement section is they're basically fact sheets about each of the nutrients we cover in the book. And then there's also fact sheets on some of the more popular additional dietary supplements that are talked about for mental health. So think like ashwagandha, St. John's wort, lavender, lemon balm, some of those that maybe you've heard of. And so in the book, we try to be careful that we're not telling you what you need to take. We're trying to help you have the correct information for you to take to your healthcare team and say, I read about this. It looks like I at risk for one of the people who might be deficient. Do you think I should take this? What lab should I take? Or what lab should I do to assess if I should take this or not? And we talk about some of the risks that people don't talk about a lot, like what happens if you take too much? Could there be interactions with other medications? I think one of the most dangerous fallacies about supplements or about these natural products is that because they're quote unquote natural, there's no harm that could come from them. But that's really not true. And some of them, like the St. John's wort that I mentioned, is actually life-threatening if you take it with an SSRI. And so it's incredibly important that you talk with your medical provider before you ever think about starting or changing a dose of a supplement. A lot of times these are also not meant to be taken forever, not into perpetuity. And so you need to think about, how long do I need a supplement? Like, what is the purpose? Something like a multivitamin can be a helpful kind of like a stopgap measure if you are coming from a place of like, maybe you've been struggling with depression, and a hallmark of depression is not taking care of yourself. You don't have the energy. You're not like, it's really, really hard. And so for that person who is really undernourished, starting with a multivitamin can be really helpful so that we're at least starting you to get some baseline that's easy. And then we can work up from there. And maybe you don't need to take it forever, but we're part of renourishing you might be supplementation.
I am so glad you brought that up because I feel like in the fitness industry as a whole, we're like, take all the things, like, don't worry, it's safe,
Not Taryn.
And I'm not like that at all. I'm the only one who's like, no, maybe don't do that. Eat real food. But I have had experiences even with like, what I thought was a multivitamin, which turned out not to be just that, where I was like really sick from it. And so I think like having something like that happen to me early on in my career, I was kind of like, ooh, we need to like really look into this kind of stuff. So do you think that lab work is like where everyone should start before they start supplementing? Or are things that they could just probably take as a matter of course that would be okay?
I think lab work is ideal, but maybe not practical for every single person. And so there are other ways to assess if you are getting enough nutrients. One of the easiest ways is to just look at your diet and see what things you might be at risk for. So Amanda mentioned a couple of those. Like, for example, a vegan diet is likely to be deficient in vitamin B12, potentially deficient in calcium, iron. It depends what kinds of foods and how varied that diet is. Who's on a carnivore diet is for sure deficient in prebiotic fiber. So, it really, you can go from that direction is just like look at what you're eating and see where the gaps might be. And then there's also other nutrients depending on where you live. Like I live in Colorado. I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt. I don't get as much sunshine. I'm likely deficient in vitamin D. So I take vitamin D even though I haven't had labs done for that because it's not very present in foods and I don't get a lot of sunshine. So there are some of those that are easy to assess. A multivitamin generally is, I'll say, spread out enough in terms of nutrition that you're unlikely to get a toxic level of any one nutrient. And so if you want sort of like, I call it like an insurance policy, if you just sort of like want to make sure that you're checking the boxes for all your nutrients, a multivitamin that's designed for your specific age and gender is probably going to be helpful as well.
I think since you guys brought it up, and especially knowing our audience and how a lot of these things are marketed to women in midlife, probably a lot of people would like to ask more about creatine. Can you talk about that and specifically for women in midlife? And what do people really need to know about creatine? What can it be helpful for? What is it not helpful for? Who might be a good candidate for exploring it further?
Creatine is sort of like an up-and-coming nutrient, I think. There's a lot of really exciting research around it, to be honest. And I'll say this as a supplement skeptic, is how I would name myself. But there actually is a lot of interesting research around it. So creatine is called a non-protein amino acid, which means that it's an amino acid like a protein. So it's a building block of proteins, but it's actually not used to build muscle. It's actually used in high energy cells to regenerate ATP, which is the energy source for cells. And so it's primarily used in muscle. Like 95% of creatine in the body is found in muscle. And that's why athletes have taken creatine, because there's really good research to show that taking creatine supplements can help improve the duration at which you're able to work out. And so you can do more reps or higher intensity reps, and you can actually build muscle faster. And I think that research is looking at like 5 to 10 grams, about 5 grams of creatine daily. It varies a little based on your weight. Technically, there are some, and these numbers are all in the book, so I'm not going to get too technical here. But then they've started to look at it for specifically treating cognitive impairment and depression. It's because the brain is another of those really high energy and requiring cells. And in depression, they see a reduction in energy. It's like a depressed energy state. And so higher doses of creatine have been shown to potentially help improve depression symptoms and also help with cognitive impairment. And that is both, could be cognitive impairment related to like a TBI, so like a traumatic brain injury. They're using it like in football players after a car accident, some of those TBIs, but then also in Alzheimer's and depression. That's where the other research is coming now. That is at a higher dose. So that's more like 10 grams plus maybe of creatine. Amanda mentioned the memory, especially after a poor night's sleep. Again, thinking of like depressed energy in those cells. So we're like giving them a chance to have more energy. Those are at even higher doses though. So that's about 20 grams where you start to see some of those like acute effects right after a poor night's sleep.
So the Alzheimer's and cognitive function are like the 20-ish grams. And depression, there is some benefit for a lower dose with SSRI treatment, that it shows some improvement in that. And then, but for higher dose impact, it being like 10 grams. So the depression, the memory and sleep deprivation is very varied on the research at this point. So yeah, but it's like, it can be a short-term improvement for you if you take that when you have sleep deprivation.
Some of the tricky things, and I think why we see some of the differences in the studies, is because the body is going to put all of the creatine basically into muscle first. And so muscle kind of gets priority. And so if you kind of have to like fill up your muscle stores first, and then you'll start to see some of those cognitive benefits. So some of the studies that were done with mental health were still using lower doses. So it's possible that you didn't see the effects because the dose wasn't high enough. So we definitely need more research in this area, but I think it's interesting and up and coming. The other thing that people ask a lot about is the type of creatine, because there is a big cost difference. And the research, creatine monohydrate, like the most common form, it's well researched. It's, generally safe as long as you're not using extreme doses for a long period of time. So there's not really a reason that we've seen to use a different, more expensive form, even though they'll tell you that it's better absorbed, better used. I would just recommend the general creatine monohydrate.
Yeah, from a fitness standpoint, I do too. And also, like, along those same lines, there's no like men's and women's creatine, even though it's marketed that way. That's part of like the pink tax for all of you listening out there who are thinking, maybe I should take creatine. You don't need the special one in the pink tub. Just like regular dude bro creatine is the same exact thing, but it's cheaper.
Just make sure to get one that's third-party certified. That is the only thing that Amanda mentioned that earlier. Supplements are regulated as food and not as medication in the United States. And so the threshold that they can enter the market is a lot lower than over-the-counter Tylenol, for example, or any of your medication. So that's why these third parties exist, is because there's not a lot of federal, like governmental oversight with supplements and in terms of their purity or quality. So especially if you're competing in any sort of like, athletic events, you need to be a third-party certified supplement to make sure that it's not been contaminated.
Yeah. And I guess just to be clear, we're not like blanket recommending that everyone out there go out and start taking creatine, like go talk to your health team, but that is interesting information and perspective to have about it. So thank you for sharing that.
I was going to say there are side effects with supplements. And so again, we don't have to go into a ton of them, but a lot of these creatine, it's better to start slowly and kind of increase gradually. But if your stomach feels bad after it, like maybe you don't need that big of a dose or something like that. So again, this is the information that we include on each of those supplement pages, is what's the research out there about certain levels, who might benefit from this, and then what is too high of a dose, what is potentially toxic dose, what are your side effects, and what could the interactions be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all laid out in a very user-friendly way. One last thing that I would love to ask you about, I know I often get clients that have ADHD, and of course that impacts kind of lots of areas of feeding yourself, and it seems like it is something that you cover in detail in the book. So can you share some thoughts that you have about that topic? I know that's kind of a big question, but how do you like to help people in that situation?
So with someone with ADHD, I really try to help them make it not be another overwhelming task, another thing to add to their list, another thing to carry around in their brain. So I try to help them make sustainable breakfast, lunch options that are easy for them. And then dinner that maybe, again, is based on like the meal planning, that it's a little more variety, but it's still maintainable. And like talking about just their daily schedule too, of like, okay, when are you tired? When do you have more energy? What can we do with that to support you in what you're making to eat? Because sometimes people with ADHD will either like have lots of energy and have time to prep their food and eat it, or they won't, and they'll just skip a meal and not eat the rest of the day and forget to eat. And so it's a lot about making sure they are fed throughout the day. They have sustained energy with the glucose balancing. And I'm also very big on sleep with people with ADHD. So if there is something they need to help them sleep that is appropriate, like magnesium glycinate is one of my favorite supplements for someone with ADHD to help them sleep if they're having a hard time sleeping, just because ADHD symptoms are amplified when you are not getting enough sleep. And then omega-3s are very important for ADHD. So I really encourage them easy omega-3 additions, walnuts, chia, fish, whatever, is the easiest for them, which I like to do like a yogurt with chia seeds and walnuts in it in the morning. And it's there and it starts your day with that. I'm trying to think of what else. But there's a lot of things that help with ADHD, like a a B complex, L-theanine, omega-3 fatty acids. What else? I just did all of these. I'm just going to read them to you so I don't miss
Okay,
it.
I didn't even necessarily supplement wise. I guess I also
just like food and nutrition. Choline is
just like strategies as well.
Yeah, I would make sure that you are eating things that you enjoy, and that there's also a part of ADHD that you often want novelty or excitement in your food. And so with that, I usually recommend to sometimes have, I call them, different cases, different carriers for your food. Instead of just a chicken salad sandwich, maybe instead have chicken salad on super fun crackers or in a pita, or like you may really love, again, maybe Caesar salad, but maybe you have a Caesar salad wrap, or you do just something a little bit different to make things fun in your way. Or like, again, like I sprinkle chia seeds on top and it's kind of like little sprinkles. I don't know. Just try to make your food fun in ways. But then I do remind them that sometimes you're just not going to feel like it's not going to be fun. Not every meal is going to be perfect and not every meal is going to be fun. So sometimes you just have to get something that's easy that you can eat, and that's okay. So it might be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with an apple and carrots for a basic lunch if you like just have nothing that you can think of to make. But you always have peanut butter and jelly and you have apples and carrots because they last a long time. So that's what I do for them. And sometimes, Anne can talk more about this with her meal planning, but having easy grab and go meals or 30-minute meals that are quick so you don't have to wait too long to eat, or it takes too long and too much energy and focus to eat. I also love crock pots for ADHD individuals because sometimes they have a lot more energy in the morning than they do after all day of decision making and trying to focus. So prepping something in the morning and then not having to think about dinner after their energy is spent is very helpful to them a lot of the time.
Yeah, such a good point.
This is so interesting to me. I have lots of friends and family with ADHD, and I've never noticed like, oh, they need fun foods, but like they absolutely are looking for like something out of the ordinary, creativity, like fun when they eat, for sure. I'm sure not everyone is like that, but I feel like I see that in my loved ones for sure. So I just want to kind of close it out with one fun, like wellness rebranded question for you. If you could rebrand the way we talk about food and mood, what would your one thing be?
I think about addition. I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record here because I keep talking about addition. But in the current healthscape, it seems like everybody is like hyper fixated on additives or sugar or like these things that they're trying to get out of their diet, or they're like seeking this like magical happy juice serum supplement, when in reality, the answer is a lot more simple. And it goes back to like Amanda was just naming all these like fun ways to add in more nutrition that doesn't have to be complicated, that can be fun and interesting, that you don't have to like choke down a green powder every day. You can just add some things to make it more fun. And that's going to help your physical body, but also your mental health in the sense of enjoyment of food, which is as critical to this full conversation as the nutrients we're talking about.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that. Amanda, do you want to add anything?
I don't know. I think mostly just that like food is part of your entire health, whether that's physical or mental. And we want to include food in our mental health.
Yeah. I feel like one of my main takeaways from today was that mental health isn't just in your head, it's also on your plate. And that's not a way that I've thought about that before. So thank you for broadening my horizons today. And I'm sure our listeners will be thrilled to hear this and to pick up your book. Can you tell us where they can grab that?
The easiest place is on Amazon. You can search for The Brain Plate Cookbook, and it'll come up. We're also online at thebrainplate.com or on Instagram at the.brain.plate.
I love it. We'll link that in the show notes for sure. Thank you so much for coming on. We have enjoyed this, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening. If you want to connect with me outside of this podcast, you can find me on Instagram at coaching_therapist.
I'm Elizabeth. You can find me at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition or in my Facebook group, Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Tara DeLeon Fitness. Guys, if you loved this episode or any of our other episodes, we would love it if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really, really helps us get the non-diet word out to the rest of the world. So please leave us a review.
Yes, thank you.